The call that changed everything. Dr. William Carter sat in his cozy home office, a faint smile playing on his lips as he flipped through old photographs. His fingers brushed over an image of 5 bright-eyed boys, their beaming faces peering back at him. It had been 13 years since he had adopted the brothers, rescuing them from a system that seemed destined to separate them. Each boy had brought a different spark to his life, filling his once quiet home with laughter, chaos, and purpose. William had always been a man driven by compassion. As a renowned surgeon, he spent his days saving lives and his nights pondering how to do more. The boys, Malcolm, Jaden, Tariq, Elijah, and little Marcus, had been the answer to that question. Their parents had died tragically in a house fire, and no relatives were willing to take on the responsibility of 5 children. When William heard their story, something deep inside him had stirred. Despite his busy schedule and single status, he knew he couldn't let them be torn apart. 13 years later, the boys had grown into remarkable young men. Malcolm, the eldest, was now 23 and studying law, determined to fight for justice. Jaden had a natural gift for art and was pursuing a degree in graphic design. Tariq was the athlete, already making waves in college football. Elijah, the quiet thinker, had dreams of becoming a teacher, while Marcus, the youngest, was still in high school, full of curiosity and endless questions. William leaned back in his chair, proud of the family they had become. But as he reached for his cup of tea, his phone buzzed, shattering the tranquil moment. He glanced at the caller ID. It was an unknown number. Frowning, he hesitated before answering. "Dr. Carter speaking," he said, his tone professional. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a distorted voice crackled through the line. "You thought you could escape the past, didn't you, Doctor?" William's heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice firm. The voice chuckled, low and menacing. "Someone who hasn't forgotten. You took something from me, and now it's time to pay." Before William could respond, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, his mind racing. What could this mean? He was a surgeon, not a man of intrigue or enemies. Yet the chilling tone of the caller left him unnerved. Shaking his head, he tried to dismiss it as a prank, but a nagging feeling told him this was far from over. That evening, the house was alive with activity. Marcus was sprawled on the living room floor, working on a school project, while Tariq and Jaden argued over a video game. Elijah sat quietly at the dining table, absorbed in a book, and Malcolm was on the couch, discussing his latest law assignment with William. "Dad," Malcolm said, his voice pulling William from his thoughts. "You seem distracted. Everything okay?" William hesitated, not wanting to burden his son. "Just a long day at the hospital," he replied, forcing a smile. "How's the case study going?" Malcolm studied him for a moment before nodding. "It's good. Professor Daniels thinks I might have a knack for litigation." "Of course you do," William said, genuinely proud. "You've always been a fighter." As the night wore on, William found himself watching his sons more closely. The laughter, the teasing, the small gestures of care, they were his world. He couldn't let anything threaten them. But the cryptic call lingered in his mind, casting a shadow over the evening. Later that night, long after the boys had gone to bed, William sat in his study, staring at the phone. He debated whether to report the call but decided against it. Without concrete details, the police would likely dismiss it as a prank. Still, the unease gnawed at him. Suddenly, a soft knock at the door startled him. "Dad." It was Malcolm. "Come in," William said, masking his concern. Malcolm entered, his expression serious. "I couldn't sleep. You've been off tonight. What's going on?" William sighed, knowing he couldn't fool his eldest. "I got a strange call earlier. Someone threatened me." Malcolm's eyes widened. "Threatened you? Did they say who they were?" "No," William admitted, "just that I took something from them." Malcolm frowned, his mind already racing through possibilities. Do you think it could be related to one of your patients? Maybe someone upset over a surgery outcome. It's possible, William said, though the explanation didn't sit right. But I've always done my best to help people. This felt personal. Malcolm nodded, his protective instincts kicking in. We should take this seriously, Dad. If it happens again, we need to involve the police. William agreed, though he hoped it wouldn't come to that. As Malcolm left the room, William couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change. The peaceful existence he had built for his family now felt fragile, as though a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. The following day at the hospital, William tried to focus on his patients, but the memory of the call lingered. His colleagues noticed his distraction, though he brushed off their concerns. During a rare moment of quiet, he decided to review his past cases, searching for any hint of someone who might hold a grudge. Hours passed, but nothing stood out. Just as he was about to give up, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from the same unknown number. The message read, "They're not really yours, Doctor. Do they know the truth?" William's blood ran cold. The boys. The message was about his sons. He immediately called home, relieved when Marcus answered. "Hey, Dad. What's up? Is everything okay there?" William asked, his voice tense. "Yeah, we're fine. Tarek's yelling at Jaden for eating his leftovers, but that's normal," Marcus said with a laugh. William forced a chuckle. "Good. Stay inside, okay? And tell your brothers not to open the door for anyone." Marcus hesitated. "Is something wrong, Dad?" "No, just being cautious," William said, trying to sound reassuring. "I'll explain later." As he ended the call, a surge of determination filled him. Whoever was behind this had crossed a line. He wasn't just a surgeon, he was a father, and he would do whatever it took to protect his family. The shadow of the past. The sun dipped low on the horizon as Dr. William Carter drove home, the golden light casting long shadows across the quiet streets. His thoughts were a storm of questions and worries. The mysterious text had shifted the situation from unsettling to deeply personal. He couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was behind this was watching his family. When William arrived home, the house buzzed with the usual evening energy. Jaden was sketching at the kitchen counter, headphones perched on his head. Tarek and Marcus were watching a basketball game in the living room, cheering loudly for their favorite team. Malcolm sat at the dining table, a legal textbook spread out before him, while Elijah was busy writing on his laptop. The normalcy of the scene brought William a brief sense of comfort, but the unease in his chest remained. Malcolm looked up as his father entered. "You're home late," he said, closing his book. His sharp eyes immediately caught the tension in William's expression. "Everything okay?" William nodded, though his jaw tightened. "We need to talk, all of us." His tone silenced the room. The boys exchanged puzzled glances, but followed him into the dining area. Curiosity and concern etched on their faces. William sat at the head of the table, his hands folded tightly together. He struggled to find the right words, not wanting to alarm them but knowing he couldn't keep them in the dark. "I received another message today," he began, his voice steady but heavy. "This time, it mentioned all of you." The boys froze. Malcolm's brow furrowed, and Tarek's usually carefree demeanor hardened. "What kind of message?" Malcolm asked. "It said," William hesitated, hating the words even as he spoke them. "They're not really yours, Doctor. Do they know the truth?" The room fell silent. Tarek's fists clenched on the table, and Marcus looked at his father with wide, uncertain eyes. Elijah, ever the quiet thinker, finally spoke. "Do you think this has something to do with our adoption?" William sighed. "I don't know, but whoever this is, they're trying to unsettle us, and I won't let that happen." Malcolm leaned forward, his voice sharp with determination. "We need to figure out who's behind this. Have you contacted the police?" "Not yet," William admitted. I wanted to talk to all of you first. I didn't want to involve anyone until I was sure we're dealing with a real threat." "Dad," Malcolm said firmly, "this is serious. They've crossed a line. If this is someone connected to our past, they could be dangerous." Jaden, usually the quiet artist, spoke up. "But why now? After all these years, why would someone come out of nowhere and start threatening us?" "That's what we need to figure out," William replied. "But until we do, I want you all to be careful. No strangers, no leaving the house alone. Stick together." That night, as the boys tried to resume their normal routines, William retreated to his study. He pulled out the thick file containing the details of the boys' adoption. He hadn't looked at it in years, but now it felt like the key to understanding what was happening. The adoption process had been complex, given the tragic circumstances. The boys' biological parents had died in a house fire, leaving no immediate family willing or able to care for them. At the time, William had been struck by the boys' resilience despite their grief. They had clung to each other, determined not to be separated, and William had promised to keep them together. As he reviewed the documents, one name caught his eye: James Porter. The name was listed under potential family contacts. William remembered Porter vaguely, an estranged uncle who had shown no interest in taking custody. But why had that name suddenly leaped out at him now? The faint hum of his desk phone interrupted his thoughts. It was Malcolm. "Dad," Malcolm said quietly, his voice tense. "There's someone parked outside the house." William's pulse quickened. "Stay inside," he said firmly. "Don't go near the windows. I'll check it out." He grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the front porch, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. The night was eerily still, the faint chirping of crickets the only sound. Sure enough, a dark sedan idled across the street, its engine running. William shone the flashlight toward the car, but its tinted windows revealed nothing. Summoning his courage, he called out, "Can I help you?" For a moment, there was no response. Then the car's engine revved, and it sped off, disappearing down the street. William stood in the driveway, his heart pounding. He felt a surge of frustration and fear. Whoever this was, they were playing games, but they had underestimated his resolve. He would not let this shadow from the past destroy the life he had built. The next day, William decided to dig deeper into the name James Porter. With Malcolm's help, they searched online records and social media. What they found was troubling. Porter had a criminal history: assault, fraud, and drug charges. Most recently, he had been released from prison after serving a sentence for armed robbery. "This guy is bad news," Malcolm said, scrolling through the records. "Do you think he's the one behind the calls and messages?" "It's possible," William said. "He's the only person connected to your past who might have a motive." "But what does he want?" Malcolm asked. "If he wanted custody, he had his chance years ago. Why come after us now?" William didn't have an answer. The more they uncovered about Porter, the more questions emerged. Had Porter been holding a grudge all these years, or was there something more sinister at play? As the days passed, the tension in the house grew. The boys tried to keep their routines, but the fear lingered. Every knock on the door, every unknown number on the phone, set them on edge. Then, one evening, the phone rang again. William answered, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Who is this?" The same distorted voice replied, dripping with malice. "I see you've been looking into me, Doctor. You shouldn't have done that." "James Porter," William said, his voice firm. "What do you want?" The voice laughed. "What I want is for you to feel what I felt. Powerless. You took them from me, and now it's my turn to take something from you." "You abandoned them," William shot back, his anger rising. "You had no claim to those boys. They're my sons." "They were never yours," Porter snarled, "and I'll make sure they know it." The line went dead. William stood there, his hand gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The fear he had been suppressing now surged to the surface. Porter wasn't just a threat. He was a man consumed by rage and a desire for revenge. He turned to find Malcolm standing in the doorway, having overheard the conversation. "Dad," Malcolm said, his voice steady but his eyes filled with worry. "We need to call the police. This guy isn't going to stop." William nodded, finally accepting that they couldn't handle this alone. "You're right," he said. "It's time to fight back." The police involvement. The decision to involve the police weighed heavily on William. He knew it was the right thing to do, but the thought of exposing his family to an official investigation left him unsettled. The boys had already endured enough hardship in their young lives. Reliving their past wasn't something he wanted for them. Malcolm stayed by his side as he made the call. The local precinct sent an officer to their home within the hour. Officer Rebecca Stanton, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes, listened intently as William recounted the calls and messages. "This James Porter," Stanton said, flipping through her notebook. "You believe he's the one contacting you?" William nodded. "He's the only person from the boy's past who might hold a grudge. I've done everything I can to keep my son safe, but he's making this personal." Stanton tapped her pen against the pad. "We'll look into Porter. If he's on parole, any harassment like this could be a violation. In the meantime, I suggest installing security cameras around your property and limiting your movements outside the house." "Already done," Malcolm interjected, his voice firm. "We set up cameras last year, and I've been monitoring them since the first call." "Good," Stanton said, impressed. "Keep me updated if anything changes. And Dr. Carter, don't hesitate to call if he contacts you again." William thanked her, though her reassurances felt thin against the storm brewing in his mind. After Stanton left, Malcolm turned to his father. "We're doing the right thing, Dad. This guy won't get near us." William nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I know, but I can't help feeling like there's more to this than we're seeing." That night, William sat in his study, poring over the adoption documents once again. Every detail felt suddenly significant, every name a potential clue. He noticed that while Porter had been listed as a relative, there had been little information about his interactions with the boys before the adoption. It was as though he had vanished from their lives long before their parents' deaths. A knock at the door startled him. It was Elijah, holding a notebook in one hand and a mug of tea in the other. "You've been at this all day," Elijah said, setting the tea down. "I thought you could use a break." William smiled, grateful for the gesture. "Thanks, Elijah. I guess I've been a little preoccupied." Elijah sat across from him, his thoughtful eyes scanning the files on the desk. "You think this guy Porter is dangerous, don't you?" "I do," William admitted, "but I also think he's desperate. People like that can be unpredictable." Elijah nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about something," he said, tapping his pen against his notebook. "If this is about us, maybe it's not just about revenge. Maybe he wants something from us." William frowned. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Elijah said. "He's been in and out of prison. He's probably broke, right? What if this is about money?" The thought sent a chill through William. "You might be right," he said. "But if that's the case, why not just come out and ask for it? Why play these games?" "Because he's trying to scare us first," Elijah replied, his voice calm but certain. "People like him, they want control. He's trying to make us feel powerless, so that when he does make his move, we're too scared to fight back." William stared at his son, amazed by his insight. "You've always been the quiet thinker," he said with a small smile. "But you're right. He's testing us." Elijah smiled faintly, but his eyes were serious. "So, what do we do now?" "We prepare," William said, his voice steady. "No matter what Porter's plan is, he won't win." The next few days passed uneventfully, though the tension in the house was palpable. The boys stayed close to home, and William made sure someone was always monitoring the security cameras. He kept the police updated on Porter's potential involvement, but there was little they could do without concrete evidence. Then, one evening, the phone rang again. William answered, his heart pounding. "This is Dr. Carter." There was silence on the other end, followed by a slow, deliberate chuckle. "You're smarter than I thought," Porter said. "Getting the cops involved, digging into my past. You've been busy." "What do you want?" William demanded, his voice sharp. "I want what's mine," Porter said, his tone venomous. "Those boys should have been with me. You had no right to take them. You abandoned them." William shot back. "You didn't care about them then, and you don't care about them now. This isn't about the boys. It's about you." Porter laughed again. "Maybe. But it doesn't matter. You'll see soon enough." The line went dead. William immediately called Officer Stanton, relaying the conversation. She promised to escalate the investigation, but her words did little to ease his mind. Porter was escalating, and William knew it was only a matter of time before he made his move. That night, William gathered the boys in the living room. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm but calm. Porter called again. "He's not backing down." The boys exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus, the youngest, spoke up. "What does he want from us?" "I don't know for sure," William admitted. "But whatever it is, he's not getting it. We're a family, and nothing can change that." Malcolm nodded, his jaw set. "We'll fight him, Dad. Together." Jaden, Tariq, and Elijah echoed their agreement, their faces resolute. Even Marcus, though scared, sat up straighter, drawing strength from his brothers. William looked at them, pride swelling in his chest. "We'll get through this," he said. "No matter what, we'll get through this." But as he looked around the room at the faces of his sons, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was only just beginning. The breaking point. The days that followed were marked by an uneasy calm, like the stillness before a storm. Dr. William Carter and his sons tried to maintain their routines, but the specter of James Porter loomed over every moment. Each noise outside the house felt ominous, every shadow a potential threat. William's resolve to protect his family hardened, but so did his sense of unease. Porter was playing a psychological game, chipping away at their peace, and William knew he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Late one evening, William was finishing his rounds at the hospital when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Malcolm. "Dad, someone was outside the house again. Tariq and I scared them off. But this is getting serious. Come home soon." William's heart sank. He had been expecting this escalation but hoped it would never come. He replied quickly, "I'm on my way. Lock all the doors. Don't let anyone in." He raced home, his mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. By the time he pulled into the driveway, Malcolm and Tariq were waiting on the porch, their expressions grim. "What happened?" William asked as he climbed out of the car. "We heard something outside the window," Malcolm said. "When we looked, there was a man standing in the yard. He was trying to stay in the shadows, but we could tell he was watching the house." Tariq nodded. "We went out through the back door and yelled at him. He ran, but it was definitely intentional. He wasn't just passing by." William's fists clenched. "Did you get a good look at him?" "No," Malcolm admitted, "but he was tall, wearing a dark jacket. It could have been Porter." William nodded, though his mind was racing. He ushered the boys inside, checking the locks on every door and window as they went. That night, William sat with the boys in the living room, their usual warmth replaced by a tense silence. He had hoped to shield them from the worst of this ordeal, but Porter's actions made that impossible. "I need you all to understand something," William said, his voice calm but firm. "This man, Porter, is dangerous. He's trying to intimidate us, but we can't let him. We stick together, we stay vigilant, and we protect each other. No one goes anywhere alone." The boys nodded, their faces serious. Even Marcus, usually full of youthful energy, seemed subdued. "What do we do if he comes back?" Jaden asked. his voice quiet. "We call the police immediately," William replied. "And if he tries to break in, you don't hesitate to defend yourselves. I've already contacted Officer Stanton, and she's increasing patrols in the neighborhood. But until this is resolved, we have to be ready for anything." The next day, William decided to confront the issue head-on. He reached out to Officer Stanton and requested a meeting. She agreed, inviting him to the precinct to discuss the case in more detail. When he arrived, Stanton greeted him with her usual professional demeanor. "Dr. Carter," she said, motioning for him to sit. "We've been keeping an eye on Porter. He's been seen in the area, but so far, there's nothing concrete to tie him to the incidents at your home." "That's not good enough," William said, his frustration evident. "He's stalking my family. He's sent threatening messages, and now he's showing up at my house. What more do you need to take action?" Stanton leaned forward, her expression serious. "I understand your frustration, but we're bound by the law. Without direct evidence or a clear violation of his parole, we can't arrest him. That said, we're doing everything we can to monitor him, and I'm increasing surveillance around your neighborhood." William took a deep breath, trying to temper his anger. "What should I do in the meantime? I can't just sit around and wait for him to make his next move." "Stay vigilant," Stanton said. "Keep your cameras running and document everything. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be. And if he contacts you again, call us immediately." When William returned home, he found Malcolm waiting for him in the study. "How did it go?" his son asked. "Not as well as I'd hoped," William admitted. "The police are watching him, but they can't do much without hard evidence." Malcolm frowned. "So, we're on our own." "For now," William said, "but we're not powerless. I've been thinking about what Elijah said. Porter might be after money. If that's true, we need to be prepared for him to escalate." Malcolm nodded. "What can I do to help?" William hesitated, then said, "Keep an eye on the security cameras, and start researching self-defense laws. If Porter forces his way into this house, I need to know we're within our rights to protect ourselves." Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll handle it." That night, the first crack in their defenses appeared. Around 2 a.m., the house was plunged into darkness as the power cut out. William woke immediately, his years as a surgeon honing his ability to react quickly to unexpected situations. He grabbed a flashlight and moved through the house, checking on the boys. "What happened?" Tarek asked, rubbing his eyes as he joined William in the hallway. "Power's out," William said. "Stay with your brothers. I'm going to check the breaker box." As he stepped outside, the chilly night air sent a shiver down his spine. The breaker box was located at the side of the house, and as he approached it, he noticed something unusual. The lock had been cut. His heart sank. Someone had deliberately tampered with it. Suddenly, he heard a rustling noise behind him. He spun around, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a brief moment, he thought he saw a shadow dart across the yard, but it disappeared too quickly to be certain. William's pulse raced as he hurried back inside. He locked the door behind him and gathered the boys in the living room. "Someone's out there," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "Stay together and don't open the door for anyone." "What about the power?" Jaden asked, his voice trembling. "It can wait," William said. "Right now, our priority is staying safe." He called Officer Stanton, who promised to send a patrol car immediately. As they waited, William stood by the front door, gripping the flashlight tightly. The boys huddled together, their fear palpable but their bond unshaken. When the patrol car arrived, the officers found no sign of Porter or anyone else. However, the evidence of tampering was clear. Stanton called William the next morning to inform him that they were escalating their surveillance efforts. "It's only a matter of time before he slips up," she said. "And when he does, we'll be ready." William thanked her, but her words offered little comfort. Porter was becoming bolder, and William knew that the next confrontation might not end so quietly. As he hung up the phone, He looked at his sons. They were his life, his reason for everything. And as long as he had breath in his body, he would protect them, no matter the cost. The man in the shadows. The atmosphere in the Carter household had shifted from unease to outright vigilance. Every member of the family was on edge, scanning the house and its surroundings for any sign of James Porter. Even Marcus, the youngest, kept glancing at the windows, his usual carefree energy replaced by quiet determination. Dr. William Carter, however, wasn't just waiting. He was planning. His sons had grown up watching him take charge of crises in the operating room, and now he was applying that same calculated precision to protecting their family. But this wasn't a problem he could solve alone. He needed allies, and he needed answers. The morning after the power outage, William drove across town to meet an old friend. Detective Marcus Grant had been a close companion during William's medical school days, though their paths had diverged since. Marcus had risen through the ranks of law enforcement, earning a reputation as a relentless investigator. If anyone could help William understand James Porter's motives, it was him. The cafe where they met was quiet, its patrons murmuring softly over their coffee. Marcus arrived right on time, his sharp eyes scanning the room before he spotted William. "Will," Marcus said, extending a hand. "It's been a while." "Too long," William replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Thanks for meeting me." Marcus ordered a black coffee and slid into the booth across from William. "You sounded serious on the phone. What's going on?" William didn't waste time. He explained everything. The threatening calls, the messages, the figure outside the house, and the power outage. He even shared his suspicions about Porter. Marcus listened intently, his expression growing graver with each detail. When William finished, Marcus leaned back in his seat, his brow furrowed. "This Porter guy," Marcus said, "he's got a history of violence and manipulation. If he's targeting you, it's not random. He's thought this through." William nodded. "That's what worries me. He's not acting impulsively. He's calculated." Marcus tapped his fingers on the table, deep in thought. "We need to find out what he's really after. You said he's claiming the boys aren't yours. Is there any truth to that? Something he could exploit?" "No," William said firmly. "Their biological parents are gone, and Porter never fought for custody. He has no legal claim to them." "Then it's either revenge or leverage," Marcus said. "Either way, he wants something. Let me run a deeper background check on him. If he's planning something bigger, we'll find it." Back at home, Malcolm had taken over monitoring the security cameras, his laptop displaying live feeds from every angle of the house. Carrick had set up an impromptu watch schedule, ensuring someone was always awake and alert during the night. Jaden used his artistic skills to create detailed sketches of the man they'd seen outside, hoping to give the police a clearer picture of who they were dealing with. Even Marcus, despite his young age, contributed by researching self-defense techniques online and sharing them with his brothers. Elijah, ever the quiet observer, had been poring over the adoption records, trying to piece together anything that might shed light on Porter's motives. When William returned, he found the boys gathered in the living room, their makeshift war room. Malcolm looked up from his laptop. "Did your meeting help?" "It did," William said. "My friend Marcus is digging into Porter's background. If there's anything we've missed, he'll find it." "Good," Malcolm said, "because we caught something on the cameras last night." William's heart quickened. "What did you see?" Malcolm turned his laptop around, showing footage from the backyard camera. The timestamp was just after midnight. A shadowy figure moved cautiously near the edge of the property, staying just out of the camera's main view. At one point, the figure paused, looking directly toward the house before disappearing into the darkness. "It's blurry," Malcolm said, "but it's definitely someone watching us." William stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Send this to Officer Stanton. She needs to see it." Later that evening, William received a call from Detective Grant. "Will, I found something," Marcus said, his tone grave. "Porter's got connections to a group of shady individuals. Loan sharks, mostly. Looks like he's in deep with them. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. William's stomach sank. So, this is about money. Most likely, Marcus said. But here's the thing. He doesn't have the money to pay them back, and they're not the type to forgive debts. My guess is he sees you as an opportunity. Maybe he thinks he can extort you. That's insane, William said. I've got no connection to him beyond the boys. Doesn't matter, Marcus replied. Desperate people do desperate things. If he thinks he can get you to pay up, he'll push until you either give in or fight back. What do you recommend? William asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Don't engage with him directly, Marcus said. Let the police handle him. But prepare yourself for the possibility that he might escalate. If he feels cornered, he could become dangerous. William thanked Marcus and ended the call, his mind racing. He shared the news with Malcolm, who listened intently. So he's trying to use us as leverage, Malcolm said, his voice cold with anger. Does he think we're just pawns? He doesn't understand who we are, William said, his voice firm. We're not pawns, Malcolm. We're a family. And we'll stand together. The next night, William awoke to the sound of shattering glass. His heart pounded as he leaped from his bed and grabbed the baseball bat he kept in his closet. He moved quickly but quietly down the hallway, finding Malcolm already there, holding a golf club. The kitchen window, Malcolm whispered. It's broken. The other boys emerged from their rooms, their faces pale but determined. William motioned for them to stay back as he and Malcolm crept toward the kitchen. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly, followed by the creak of a door opening. William's adrenaline surged. He whispered to Malcolm, "Call the police." As Malcolm backed away to dial, William stepped into the kitchen, his bat raised. A figure stood near the counter, rummaging through a drawer. When William flicked on the light, the intruder froze. It was Porter. He turned slowly, a sneer spreading across his face. "Evening, Doctor," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Nice place you've got here." "Get out," William said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Porter took a step forward, his hands raised mockingly. "Relax, Doc. I'm just here to talk." "Breaking into my house isn't talking," William snapped. "The police are on their way. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Porter chuckled. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." With that, he turned and fled through the broken window, disappearing into the night just as the sound of sirens grew louder. The police arrived moments later, taking statements and examining the damage. Officer Stanton pulled William aside. "This changes things," she said. "Breaking and entering is a serious offense. We'll find him." William nodded, though his relief was tempered by a deeper fear. Porter had crossed a line, and there was no telling what he would do next. As he looked at his sons, he made a silent vow. No matter what it took, he would keep them safe. The battle wasn't over, but William was ready to fight. And this time, he wouldn't hold back. Confrontation in the dark. After the police left, the Carter household was eerily quiet. The boys had cleaned up the shattered glass and secured the broken window with plywood, but the damage ran deeper than the physical breach. Porter's intrusion had shaken the sense of safety William had worked so hard to build. Marcus clung to William's arm as the family sat together in the living room, the weight of the night heavy on everyone. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "Is he going to come back?" William pulled his youngest son close, his jaw tightening with resolve. "Not if I can help it," he said. "I'll make sure of it." The next morning, Officer Stanton called with an update. "We've issued a warrant for Porter's arrest," she said. "But he's slippery. We're tracking him. But until we have him in custody, I want you and your family to remain vigilant." "Thank you," William said, though her words provided little comfort. He knew Porter wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted, or was forced to face consequences. William decided to take additional measures. He hired a private security firm to install advanced alarms and motion detectors around the property. He also ordered reinforced locks for all the doors and windows. The boys watched as the security team worked, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. "This feels like a war zone," Tariq muttered as he helped the workers carry equipment. "It is," Malcolm replied grimly. "And we're not losing." That evening, Detective Grant called with more information. "We've uncovered something interesting," he said. "Porter's financial troubles are worse than we thought. He owes a lot of money to dangerous people, people who won't hesitate to use violence to collect." William frowned. "Do you think he's acting on their orders?" "It's possible," Grant said. "If he promised them money and can't deliver, they might be pressuring him to find a way. You could be his ticket out." William felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "If he's desperate enough to break into my house, he might be desperate enough to hurt my family." Grant's tone hardened. "If it comes to that, you do what you need to do to protect them. But hopefully, we'll catch him before it gets to that point." That night, the house was unusually quiet. The new security system hummed softly, its sensors scanning the property. William sat in his study, staring at the adoption papers spread across his desk. He felt a mix of anger and sadness. Anger at Porter for targeting his family and sadness at the thought of the boys being dragged into this nightmare. A soft knock on the door broke his reverie. Malcolm entered, his face serious. "Dad, we need to talk." William gestured for him to sit. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about Porter," Malcolm said. "He's not just coming after us because of money. He's trying to tear us apart, make us doubt each other, doubt you." William sighed. "You're right. He's playing a psychological game, and he's hoping we'll fall apart under the pressure." "But we won't," Malcolm said firmly. "We've been through worse, Dad. We've lost everything before, but we still had each other. That's what Porter doesn't understand. He can't break us." William looked at his eldest son, pride swelling in his chest. "You're right, Malcolm. And as long as we stand together, he can't win." Later that night, as the house settled into an uneasy sleep, the motion detectors outside the house triggered an alarm. The sharp, piercing sound jolted William awake. He grabbed the bat from beside his bed and rushed to the control panel, where Malcolm was already checking the security feed. There, Malcolm pointed to the screen. A figure was moving near the back fence, trying to disable one of the cameras. William's heart pounded. "Stay here," he said. "I'm calling the police." Malcolm grabbed his arm. "You're not going out there alone." "I'll be fine," William said. "Just watch the cameras and make sure the others stay inside." As William stepped into the cool night air, the alarm's wail subsided, leaving an unsettling silence. He moved cautiously, his bat gripped tightly in his hands. The figure was still near the fence, focused on the camera. "Porter!" William shouted, his voice cutting through the night. The man froze, then turned slowly. It was Porter, his face partially obscured by a hoodie. His expression twisted into a sneer. "Well, look who decided to join me," he said. "Leave my property," William said, his voice steady. "The police are on their way." Porter laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think they scare me? You've got no idea what I'm dealing with." "I don't care what you're dealing with," William said, stepping closer. "Stay away from my family." Porter's sneer faded, replaced by a look of raw desperation. "I don't have a choice, Doc. Those boys, they're my ticket out of this mess. You don't get it. If I don't pay up, I'm dead." "That's not my problem," William said. "You abandoned them years ago. You don't get to come back now and pretend you care." "I didn't abandon them," Porter snapped, his voice rising. "I was pushed out, lied to, tricked. You stole them from me." William stared at him, his grip tightening on the bat. "You were given a chance to step up, and you walked away. Don't rewrite history to suit your narrative." Porter took a step forward, and William raised the bat, ready to defend himself. But before the confrontation could escalate, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Porter hesitated, then bolted toward the fence, disappearing into the shadows just as the patrol cars arrived. The officers searched the area, but found no trace of Porter. Officer Stanton spoke to William, her expression grim. "He's desperate, and that makes him dangerous. We'll keep looking, but you need to be prepared for anything." William nodded, though his mind was already racing. This wasn't just a battle to protect his family. It was a test of everything they had built together. As he returned to the house, his sons gathered around him, their faces a mix of fear and determination. "We're not running," William said, his voice firm. "We're not hiding. This is our home, and we're going to protect it." The boys nodded, their unity stronger than ever. And as they prepared for whatever came next, William knew one thing for certain. They were a family, and no one, not even James Porter, could take that away. Porter's ultimatum. The next morning, the Carter household stirred with quiet resolve. The air was heavy with tension, but the boys moved with purpose. William stood in the kitchen, watching as Malcolm gave Marcus a crash course in self-defense. Jaden was organizing the emergency supplies they'd prepared, and Tarek was double-checking the security system. Elijah sat at the dining table, poring over a thick folder of documents. His sharp mind had become a crucial asset in piecing together Porter's motivations. As William joined him, Elijah looked up, his expression thoughtful. "Dad," Elijah began, sliding a piece of paper across the table, "I think I've figured out why Porter's so desperate. It's not just the debt." William leaned in, studying the paper. It was a copy of a court document, a child custody hearing from years ago. Elijah had circled a particular section that detailed Porter's failed bid for custody of the boys after their parents' deaths. "He tried to take us," Elijah said, his voice steady. "But the court ruled against him because of his criminal record and unstable lifestyle." William nodded, remembering the tense adoption process. "I knew he was deemed unfit, but I didn't realize how hard he fought to challenge the decision." Elijah's brow furrowed. "This wasn't just about us. Porter saw us as a way out of his own failures. If he had custody, he could have used us to fix his life, get government support, maybe even leverage us for sympathy." William's jaw tightened, and now he's using the same twisted logic to justify his actions. Elijah nodded. "But here's the thing. He doesn't just want money. He wants control. He wants to feel like he's still in charge of something." William's chest swelled with pride at his son's insight, but the realization left a bitter taste. Porter's obsession wasn't just dangerous. It was deeply personal. Later that day, William received an unexpected call. The number was unlisted, but he recognized the pattern. It was Porter. He stepped into his study, shutting the door behind him. "What do you want?" William demanded. Porter's voice crackled through the line, calm yet venomous. "You've been busy, Doc, digging into my past, talking to the cops, playing the hero, but you're forgetting one thing." "And what's that?" William shot back. "You're not the only one with something to lose," Porter said. "You think your little fortress can protect them. Think again." William's grip tightened on the phone. "If you come near my family again, I'll make sure you regret it." Porter laughed, a hollow, menacing sound. "You're not in a position to threaten me. Here's how this works. You pay me what I need, 200 grand, and I disappear. No more calls, no more visits. You buy your peace." William's stomach churned. "And if I don't?" There was a pause before Porter replied, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "Then I'll make sure your precious boys know exactly where they came from. I'll ruin you, Carter. Piece by piece." The line went dead. William stared at the phone, his mind reeling. The ultimatum was clear, but the stakes were even higher. Porter wasn't just targeting him. He was threatening the boys' sense of identity, their very foundation. William called a family meeting that evening. The boys gathered in the living room, their faces reflecting the weight of the situation. Porter called again. William began, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "He's demanding money. $200,000. The room fell silent. Malcolm was the first to speak. "He's extorting you. You can't give in." "I won't," William assured him. "But there's more. He threatened to tell you things about your past." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Like what?" William took a deep breath. "Things that might make you question who you are, where you come from. He wants to use that against us, to make us doubt each other." The boys exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and defiance. Tariq leaned forward, his voice firm. "Dad, we know who we are. You raised us. Porter has no right to take that away." Elijah nodded. "We've come too far to let him tear us apart." Jaden, always the quiet one, finally spoke. "We trust you, Dad. Whatever he says, it doesn't change what we feel together." William felt a surge of emotion, his love for his sons overwhelming. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "We'll face this together, but we have to be smart. Porter's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." The next few days were tense but productive. William worked closely with Detective Grant and Officer Stanton, providing every piece of information they had on Porter. The police increased their patrols, and William made sure the house was never left unattended. Meanwhile, Malcolm took the lead on researching legal options. He found a way to request a restraining order, though he warned it might take time to enforce. Tariq doubled down on training the younger boys in self-defense, turning their backyard into an impromptu dojo. Jaden created sketches of Porter and distributed them to neighbors, asking them to report any sightings. Elijah continued combing through the adoption records, searching for any leverage they could use against Porter. Even Marcus, despite his youth, found ways to contribute. He wrote a heartfelt letter to William, thanking him for being their father and promising to stand by him no matter what. William found the letter tucked into his medical bag one morning, and it brought tears to his eyes. One evening, just as the family was sitting down to dinner, the doorbell rang. William's heart leaped into his throat. The boys froze, their eyes darting to him. "Stay here," William said, grabbing the bat he kept by the door. He approached cautiously, checking the security feed on his phone. To his surprise, it wasn't Porter. It was a woman, middle-aged, with weary eyes and a nervous demeanor. William opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" The woman hesitated before speaking. "My name is Linda. I'm James Porter's sister." William's grip on the door tightened. "Why are you here?" "I need to talk to you," Linda said, her voice pleading. "Please." "It's about James." William hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Linda entered, glancing nervously around the house. She sat at the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she began, "but I couldn't let James drag you into this without explaining." "Explaining what?" William asked, his tone guarded. Linda sighed. "James, he's not just in debt. He's in over his head. The people he owes, they're dangerous, and he thinks the only way out is through you." William's eyes narrowed. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I don't want him to hurt you," Linda said. "Or your boys. James, he's not thinking clearly. He's desperate, and desperate men do stupid, reckless things." William leaned forward, his voice firm. "If you know where he is, tell me. The police need to stop him before he does something he can't take back." Linda hesitated, then nodded. "I think I know where he's hiding." That night, with Linda's information in hand, William called Detective Grant. The police moved quickly, organizing a team to track Porter down. As William watched the patrol cars disappear into the night, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this ordeal was nearing its end. But as he turned back to his family, he couldn't shake the feeling that Porter's threats were far from over. Desperate men were dangerous, and William knew they had yet to see the full extent of James Porter's desperation. The final reckoning. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation. The police had taken Linda's information seriously, launching a full-scale search for James Porter. William and his sons stayed close, their home transformed into a fortress of vigilance. Though every window was secured and the new security system hummed with precision, the sense of unease lingered. Malcolm sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open as he monitored the security feeds. Tariq paced near the front door, his muscular frame radiating nervous energy. Jaden sketched quietly in a corner, his pencil strokes deliberate but tense. Elijah and Marcus sat together on the couch, their faces stoic but watchful. William moved between the rooms, checking locks, scanning shadows, and reassuring his boys. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, a storm brewing just beyond their defenses. Around midnight, the phone rang. The sound shattered the silence like a gunshot, and William lunged to answer it. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice tight. It was Detective Grant. "We found him," Grant said. "Or at least we found where he was. Linda's lead was solid, an abandoned warehouse near the docks. But by the time we got there, he was gone." William's grip on the phone tightened. Did he leave anything behind? "Plenty," Grant replied grimly. "We found evidence of his plans, notes about your house, your work schedule, even your son's routines. He's been watching you closely, Will. Too closely." William's stomach churned. "What's your next move?" "We've put out an APB," Grant said. "He won't get far, but I need you to stay on high alert. If he's desperate, he might come straight to you." William nodded, though the detective couldn't see him. "Thanks, Marcus. Keep me updated." After hanging up, William gathered his sons in the living room. He explained what the police had found, sparing no details. "This isn't over," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Porter is more dangerous than ever. We need to be ready." Malcolm nodded, his expression fierce. "We've got this, Dad." Tariq grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Let him try. He won't make it past us." Elijah, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. "What if he doesn't come alone? If he's working with these dangerous people, we need to be prepared for more than just him." William nodded. "Good point. Everyone stays together, no exceptions. We watch the cameras, keep the doors locked, and call the police at the first sign of trouble." The early hours of the morning passed in tense silence. The boys took shifts watching the security feeds while William tried to rest, though his mind refused to settle. He lay on the couch, his bat resting against the wall beside him, listening to the faint hum of the alarm system. Just as dawn began to creep over the horizon, the motion sensors outside the house triggered. The sharp beep of the alarm jolted everyone awake. Malcolm checked the cameras, his voice urgent. "Dad, he's here." William rushed to the screen. Sure enough, a figure was moving through the shadows near the backyard. It was Porter, his movements deliberate but frantic. He held something in his hand, something metallic that glinted in the faint light. William's heart raced. "Call the police," he told Malcolm. "Now." Tariq grabbed a heavy flashlight and stood by the back door, his stance tense but ready. Jaden moved Marcus and Elijah toward the staircase, keeping them out of harm's way. William grabbed the bat, his mind focused and clear. This was it, the moment he had dreaded and prepared for. Porter moved to the back door, fiddling with the lock. The new security measures held, but the tension in the house was palpable. William stepped forward, his voice steady. "Porter, stop. The police are on their way." Porter froze, his face twisted in rage. "I don't care. You don't get to win, Carter. They're mine." "They're not yours," William said, his voice rising. "You gave up that right years ago. This ends here." Porter raised the object in his hand, a crowbar, and slammed it against the door. The reinforced locks held firm, but the noise sent a shockwave through the house. Marcus whimpered softly from the staircase, and William felt his anger boil over. "You're not getting in," William said, stepping closer to the door. "And you're not taking anything from me." Porter's eyes burned with desperation. "You don't know what it's like. To lose everything. To have nothing." "I do know," William replied, his voice cracking. "But I didn't use it as an excuse to hurt others. You don't get to blame your failures on us." The sound of sirens in the distance seemed to jolt Porter out of his rage. He backed away from the door, his expression shifting from anger to panic. "This isn't over," he spat, turning to run. But as he reached the edge of the yard, the police arrived. Officers poured out of their vehicles, surrounding Porter with weapons drawn. He froze, realizing he had nowhere left to go. The police subdued Porter without incident, but his arrest did little to ease the tension in William's chest. As the officers loaded Porter into a squad car, Detective Grant approached William, his expression grim but relieved. "It's over," Grant said. "He won't be bothering you again." William nodded, though the weight of the ordeal still pressed on him. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." Grant patted his shoulder. "You did everything right, Will. You kept your family safe. That's what matters." Back inside, the boys gathered around William, their relief palpable. Malcolm was the first to speak. "It's really over." "It's over," William said, pulling them into a group hug. "He's gone." For the first time in weeks, the house felt peaceful. The boys smiled, their bond stronger than ever. Marcus clung to William, his voice small but steady. "We're safe now, right?" William kissed the top of his son's head. "Yes, Marcus, we're safe." In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The boys resumed their routines, though they remained cautious. William worked closely with the police to ensure Porter stayed behind bars, and the family began to heal from the ordeal. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Malcolm raised a toast. "To Dad," he said, his voice full of emotion, "for protecting us, believing in us, and being the best father we could ever ask for." The boys echoed the sentiment, their faces glowing with love and pride. William felt tears sting his eyes as he raised his glass. "To us," he said, "for being a family, no matter what." The room filled with laughter and warmth, the darkness of the past replaced by the light of their unbreakable bond. Though the journey had been harrowing, they had emerged stronger, together, as a family.